this room to have this discussion and dialogue. I will tell you that in the conferences that we have had as a new Republican majority here in the 112th Congress, I have heard zero visionary discussion about taxes. All we've talked about is cutting some spending, and maybe, actually we're about done with the discussion about tweaking the brackets. Now, if we stay in that intellectual corral that we are in today, we're not going to move America forward. This dialogue is more important than any I've heard amongst ourselves at this point, because we haven't had any. And it's important that we listen to everybody here and think about what's doable, but also what is visionary. And I want to talk to you about the visionary and the doable. And first, the narrative is this, that I think I've been for the fair tax longer than anybody I know. I was for the fair tax before there was a fair tax. Yeah. And for me, it came to this. I started a construction business, and I was audited one too many years in a row. And that year that finally I hit the wall was for the fiscal year, or actually the calendar fiscal year for me, in 1979. I was audited in 1980. That was one too many in a row, and I had learned my lessons, and we didn't have copy machines, and I sat there, I shut my business down, and I told the auditor, you want any of my records? That's fine, they're right here in this filing cabinet. You asked for them, I'll hand you the paper. You write your notes, you hand it back to me, I'll put it in the file so I can defend myself, and then I'll give you the next paper. We did that for 4 days. Now, some people that know me will say that wasn't maybe the very best way to negotiate with the IRS, but I had enough, and we got done. They declared I owed them a bunch of money. I believe, to this day, I followed the tax laws to the letter. But when it came down to whether I was going to stand up and fight the full resources of the federal government and the IRS with my tiny little bit of emerging capital, it was clear to me my choice was stand on principle or lose your business, or stand on principle and lose your business, or make this concession, go borrow the money and try to keep the business going and pay off the loan to pay the IRS. That's where I borrowed the money, and I climbed into the seat of my bulldozer, and smoke went out the exhaust stack like it did every morning about sunrise, and it came out of my ears. And I began to think, why is the IRS in my life? Why are they making Monday morning quarterback decisions? I want rid of them. And as soon as that clicked into my mind, you don't have to think about it very long to figure out what to do. The only way you can fund the federal government if you're going to abolish the IRS and the federal income tax code is to do so with a national retail sales tax on consumption and on consumption as well. So when I began to work that out, I'd sit there in the seat and work it out, and then I'd go to my Oshkosh by Gosh caucus, which was the round table in the restaurant, those guys in overalls, and they're wise people, and finally they couldn't answer my questions anymore, and they said, well, the reason we don't do this is this. If it were such a good idea, we would have already done it by now. We've heard that before. No, it is a great idea. And I've turned this idea around every way you can, this Rubik's Cube of the fair tax, and looked at it from every angle. And every time I turn it again, and again, it looks better and better and better, with fewer and fewer, I'll say, and maybe perhaps no weak spots in it. And so it brings me to this. We just celebrated Ronald Reagan's 100th birthday. And I was privileged to be out of Simi Valley and up to the ranch. And standing in his shadow, and we stand on his shoulders at the same time, he once said, what you tax, you get less of. But do you realize that the federal government does realize that? They have a first lien on all productivity in America. If you have earnings, savings, and investment, if you punch the time clock, if you're going to cash in for dividends or capital gains, Uncle Sam's there with her handout. And when you die, Uncle Sam's there with his handout. The federal government has the first lien on all productivity in America. And what I want to do, and what many others want to do with the fair tax, is take that punishment off of the production in America and put it over on consumption. What you tax, you get less of. Let's take the tax off of production. Let Americans produce, earn, and save and invest all they want to, and build all the capital they want to build, and pay the taxes voluntarily when they consume for personal consumption. That's the vision. And so because we're a bit of a narrow time frame here, and I could do this for a long time, I just will take you down to this, that I could hit each point of this along the way and have this discussion in the minor components of the fair tax. But it comes down to this. When when Alan Greenspan stepped down as chairman of the Fed, I asked for a meeting with him downtown here in Washington in his Spartan office. It looked like it was just set up for his retirement. No books or anything in there. And we sat there in that empty office, and I tried to convince him that he should be the spokesman for the fair tax and we could move this. And actually he had a good reason to defer. He said, I need to let Ben Bernanke have his voice, kind of like a president that's retired shouldn't engage in foreign policy and step on the prerogative of his successor. All right, I respect that. So I said to him, I'm going to go down through all the things that the fair tax does, and I want you to challenge me if it can't be sustained in a debate from an economic viewpoint. And I went down through the list. It abolishes the IRS. It abolishes personal and corporate income tax and capital gains and taxes on interest and dividends, and the list goes on and on. And I went through all of that, and I said, can I sustain that argument, and is it all legitimate? And he said, reasonable economists will not disagree. The fair tax does all the things that you say. This is not an economic argument about the fair tax. It is a political argument, and you're the politician, he's the economist. And so, as I went through the list, he said, you forgot a couple of things. The fair tax provides an incentive for savings and investment. You need to add that argument to the list that you have made, and then keep saying it. So, it boils down to this. The fair tax does, this is now my statement, not one that's ratified by Alan Greenspan, who may not be in as good a favor today as he was then. But I will tell you that here's my statement. The fair tax does everything good that anybody's tax proposal does that is good. It does them all, and it does them all better, and now we have to pass it in this Congress. Thank you.
Brilliant, well stated. Could I ask the Congressman to give a 2-minute announcement about a very interesting project that you're working on Obamacare? Because I just want everybody to be aware of that, and then we'll go back to the tax issue.
You're an MC here. Thanks, Grover. Here's kind of a bit of an unknown circumstance. I've been working on the repeal of Obamacare ever since its passage and working to kill it prior to that. I laid out a strategy to cut off all funding to Obamacare 10 months ago. And I asked that the repeal be H.R. 1. It came out as H.R. 2. There's no complaint on my part. We did pass the repeal. But the next stage needs to be to shut off all funding to Obamacare in each of our appropriations bills. We have a huge appropriation bill coming up next week. It's the CR, the continuing resolution. And in that continuing resolution, there will be some funding to Obamacare. They're all pretty good with bringing an amendment to cut that funding out. That amounts to about $1.2 billion. And we have $100 billion that we will cut from the budget in that CR. But the part that is not addressed is the part that hardly anybody knows about, and that is the automatic appropriations that were written into the Obamacare bill. And that finally got the number on yesterday from CRS. We did the tally in our office because nobody had asked the question and nobody had answered it, obviously. And then CRS ratified, and with a minor correction, our numbers. And it's this. Obamacare automatically appropriates $105.5 billion. And if we don't touch that in the CR, that will be the roots that will go down on Obamacare. They will be implemented and enforced with automatic appropriations. This CR is the best leverage we are going to have. It's must-pass legislation. We should not cede that ground, and I'm asking leadership to write my amendment language into the bill because it's subject to a point of order if they do not. And that's the message that I hope that they get, and I hope they agree with me by Monday. I'm going to continue to make the argument throughout the weekend. Thank you.